Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for Bitcoin and Web3. I'm your host, Kelley Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, the leading provider of communications and PR strategy in our unique industry. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in the space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR.
Hi, everyone. Today I am joined by Kelsey McGuire, who is the Chief Growth Officer at Shardeum. Previously, Kelsey served as CMO at crypto investment firm CoinFund. She also formerly managed partner marketing at Cello and worked in marketing leadership roles at Consensys. Welcome, Kelsey.
Hi, Kelley. Thank you so much for having me on again.
I'm so excited to have you back. So for context, Kelsey and I recorded a special episode, season 3, episode 5, right at the beginning of the pandemic. So you can go back and listen to that one when she was co-head of experiential marketing at Consensys. We did a special episode on communications during a crisis. So lots of tips. That was a crazy time, but glad to be back during more normal circumstances.
Yes, me too. We should have a little bit of a broader conversation this time around.
Well, Kelsey, walk us through your Web3 background and what your role entails today at Shardeum.
Absolutely. So I started full-time in Web3 with Consensys around 2018, I want to say. So it was a really interesting journey for me because I hadn't worked in tech before that. I'd done some consulting, but nothing really full-time. So I gave myself a crash course and luckily had some great community support and ended up kicking things off as a community strategist over at Consensys and eventually leading some of our experiential marketing efforts. After that, I went over to Cello, where I was focused on partner marketing. They're very global, so I really appreciated being able to work with organizations all around the world, really, as we were building that out. I then switched over to the investment side and was CMO at CoinFund before finally, recently, actually joining Shardium as CGO.
No kidding. You have such a rich history of, different marketing capacities for so many different Web3, entities. So I'm excited to dive in. But what drew you to joining the Shardium team?
Yeah. So, I wasn't completely closed off to opportunities, but wasn't actively seeking someone. Our VP of people had reached out and I had a few conversations, and really it started striking me that this was a team that was very, very dedicated, very community oriented, and maybe even kind of more driven and excited around the mission, more so than almost any other project I've seen. So it was a unique opportunity to really dive in at a fairly early stage. So I was really happy I got to join as CGO.
How did you transition from a CMO to a CGO role, and what shifts have you had to make when pivoting to this kind of slightly different responsibility role?
Absolutely. And the interesting thing, I've had a number of conversations with folks around titles and roles and really what can make sense for different types of career trajectories. Because I find that a lot of times as a CMO and as kind of a strictly sort of marketing titled role, that you can get a little bit more pigeonholed and that the role doesn't necessarily, or the title doesn't necessarily encompass all of the partnership work that you do, all of the relationship building and sort of that strategic level of work that I see a lot of CMOs doing. So after speaking with Shardium and we were exploring different roles and titles, we landed on CGO because that does seem to really kind of encompass a lot more of the sort of go-to-market and strategic work that many, many CMOs do anyway. It hasn't been a massive shift from the work before, but I do feel like it can be a better title as well for CMOs that are really getting out there and looking to engage in speaking slots. Because I still feel like there can be the occasional bias against those marketing titles when you're looking to present your project and what you're doing at even a conference or a podcast or anything like that as well. A CGO role, I feel like, can give you a little bit more of a toehold or a foot in the door.
That's a really interesting point that I hadn't considered, but you're right. And I'm so happy to see you doing more, outward facing speaking opportunities because you're so well suited for those in addition to all of the things, the hats that you wear as a marketer. What challenges are marketers facing in Web3 today and how can we best overcome them in your opinion?
Yeah, so I see a lot of the same challenges that I saw before when I started in 2018. I think that there's a lot of talent out there, but I still see hiring as a challenge. Now that we're a little bit more well established in the Web3 space, I feel like we have a better pool of candidates, but still there are occasional spammy applicants. And I think that sometimes for slightly less experienced marketers or folks in the space, it's easy for folks to sort of get through those initial, almost like checkpoints and guardrails and get hired and kind of lower the credibility of marketing professionals overall. So I think that that is a big challenge that we're trying to manage as a community as we grow a little bit more. I think another massive one is trust. Of course, with a still relatively new technology, we really need to focus on building narratives and educating to build trust, really leveraging those strategic partnerships so we understand how to tap into various communities and really kind of bring the focus back to humans and people, which is what this technology is ultimately for. And then kind of lastly, one of the interesting kind of issues or challenges I see marketers facing are falling into patterns of just like hype building, FOMO type machine campaigns. And it's just not something that I see us building a lot of lasting community with. And I think it can actually damage some of the credibility of the industry overall. So I definitely always encourage folks to try to move away from anything that feels like a overly quick, simple kind of transactional win based on feelings of being left out or scarcity, and rather focus on more of those long-term community-oriented efforts and relationship building.
Interesting point. Yes. And I mean, from a PR standpoint, it is overarching brand building and it's not a quick hit. So that's one of the ways that, understanding what PR can do for you is, more of a long-term strategy. But you're right. This quick hit mentality is sort of rife in our industry, I think. Do you think that it's easier from a hiring capacity, because you mentioned that, is it easier to attract marketers from the Web2, more mainstream industries and bring them into Web3? Or is it easier to bring in folks that have a real passion for the technology and can kind of learn the growth tools and tips?
I think that's a really, really important question, Kelley. So I've seen different ways of balancing that. And I think it partially determines or depends on what the makeup of the team is. So I've seen a lot of interest both ways coming in. So you can convert those like technology or Web3 enthusiast candidates into, I think, very capable marketers. And you can convert those Web2 folks into Web3 marketers. But for me, it comes down to, will they have like Web3 expert marketers to work with? And that's where I've seen some of the challenges around that transition from Web2 to Web3 marketing. It's very doable, but I think if the team is instructed in a way where they have mentorship, they have that kind of passion to engage with the technology, it can be really, really challenging to start to acclimate the communities and little quirks that are, really the Web3 ecosystem.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for folks who are looking to jump from Web2 to Web3? Like they're, maybe intimidated by the industry?
Yes. So I know it can be very intimidating. I guess intense or aggressive communities out there that maybe don't seem always as welcoming. So I definitely recommend trying to find your group. I'm a big fan of some of the work that SheFi has done. The self-education efforts where you have an ongoing community that you can be a part of. If you're able to, not everyone can travel to these different events. And I know that it can get very expensive, but if you're able to find a local community meetup or one of the larger Web3 conferences in your area, it's very worthwhile just showing up and meeting some people face to face, because that's what I found to be the very best way to build your own small community. And we're fortunate that a lot of cities and towns and areas have some sort of small contingency of Web3 folks, and just sort of taking the plunge and getting out there and really kind of proactively following up and reaching out to those folks. Because I find that overall, people tend to be welcoming and they're just excited to welcome and have new people in the space.
Very great tip in terms of meeting up in person wherever possible. And now that the world is back up and open, it's really a possibility. It's nice to be able to, go to these conferences again and see people in person. But you're right, even the local meetups are really valuable. You've mentioned the word community absolutely over and over. And I feel like that's one of the unique opportunities, but also challenges of this industry and marketing. It's also one, I know that Shardeum has a massive international community. So perhaps you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Shardium's massive community and really their focus on community is part of the reason I decided to eventually join. We have over 500,000 folks in our Discord channel, which is something that Cole and I are very, very proud of. But there are challenges with managing communities and sort of the expectations there. I always recommend really trying to be as transparent as possible with your roadmaps, making sure that you have some dedicated people on your marketing, comms, growth team that are really diving in on a regular basis with the community as well to ensure that those overall kind of high level questions are being answered and that folks feel heard. We're really focused on community to the point, and I'd recommend this for other projects too. We're working on some new brand elements as part of a brand refresh project, and we've dropped surveys in and really just want everyone to feel as involved as possible, because with this type of decentralized technology, everyone sort of is a part of it. And when it's working right, everyone's a part of it and feels some sort of ownership over what's happening, not just this select few individuals.
How do you manage? So there's so many different facets under the umbrella of your role. How do you manage all these different aspects, like the social channels, the community channels, the growth marketing, PR efforts, thought leadership? How do you think through, all of that?
It's different with every project that I've worked on because the teams are made up of such different individuals and backgrounds. But as a general sort of rule of thumb, something that I found is incredibly helpful is starting to organize around clear, cohesive campaigns. So those campaigns make sure that everyone is oriented towards the human side of the technology, meaning specific audience segments. Those campaigns allow us to organize our thinking around some sort of key objectives, say reaching devs in a specific region or making sure that, say, Shardium is well known for solving the trilemma. And then it allows us to cohesively, as a team across many, many different time zones, map out each specific channel and how that ladders up to feed into our overall goal of that campaign. It really also helps for tracking on the back end as well. And we're starting to sort of bring everyone in and starting to get organized in that way over on our team as well. And it's really exciting to see people starting to collaborate on that level and really work together, because we can't always get on a call when we have some colleagues all around the world.
It's a unique opportunity to having like this global decentralized workplace. And it's fun to be able to interface with people from all different cultures. I'm sure you can relate to that too.
It is a really unique opportunity. This is probably one of the more, or maybe one of the most global teams I've ever worked with. And I think that gives me a lot more confidence in the technology we're building to a degree. And I think it's important to kind of look at that across the board when you're sort of examining projects, because this is a technology that I think, is supposed to serve everyone or be useful for many, many different geographies around the world. And if it's really centralized in one specific geography and saying that it can serve everyone, usually there's something missing, because you really don't know fully what it's like being somewhere else unless you're living it and facing those specific challenges every day. So something that we're really proud of over here is that we are that global.
You've also, I'm sure, between Shardium and all the different projects that you've worked with, even like, CoinFund was an umbrella where you helped a lot of different portfolios, I imagine. There's so many different audiences in Web3. A lot of the times it's developers, a lot of the times it's users. How do you see the different audiences in this industry? And then how have you sort of specifically targeted them depending on, what the goals are of the different teams?
It is a really wide range of markets. You're completely right. And it's so different being on the investor side or working with a portfolio company or working with a project like Shardium. But generally, I've been able to divide it out, especially how it relates to our different marketing and comms campaigns with, of course, developers. But then within the developer sort of bucket, you have folks that are already engaged in Web3, which is, of course, like a smaller slice of the overall developers, and folks that are kind of in that crypto curious category. And really, it's those changing market conditions and what's going on in the various news cycles, as you know, much better than almost everyone else, Kelley, is whether or not they'll convert and engage. So if there's a challenging news cycle when it comes to Web3, I would say pulling back a little bit on that crypto curious audience or investing a little bit less and making sure that you're focused on retaining the Web3 developers, especially ones that are already in your community, is a really important move. Because spending all of your time and resources, and all of them are, of course, limited in these like lean, fast moving teams, on converting an audience segment that simply won't budge during certain news cycles just isn't the best use of resources. So that's been a massive audience, of course. I think the general consumer, you have a similar sort of breakdown of folks that are already engaged with the technology versus sort of curious versus just sort of not for it at all, and making sure that you really understand the needs of each segment and design accordingly while keeping an eye on the outside world and the news cycles and not kind of isolating yourself into a little Web3 bubble of, oh, well, as soon as they see it, they'll convert. It's like, that's not really how it works when people have trust and identity at play when it comes to interacting with the technology. You know, it can come down to whether or not people want to see themselves as someone that is engaging with like Web3 or a certain cryptocurrency versus people that part of their identity is being against it. And it doesn't really matter really what the facts are until maybe there's a massive change in the news cycle.
That was such a good point. It is so true, because you have to take a look at what's going on at a macro lens. And the shifts are they go from A to Z back to A again in terms of like the sentiment and the conversation. And so canvassing like where everybody's at and then working with what you have at that moment. I mean, it's changed so much. It's changed so much in the past 3 years since we had our previous conversation even. It's incredible, really. So that's such a good point. Do you see any unique opportunities? Like right now, we're in a bear market. You know, I know we've seen opportunities from a PR standpoint that I can highlight, but are there any that you see during these types of market conditions for as opportunities that are unique to this type of market condition?
Yes, and I want to hear about the ones from your perspective as well. But I think with these kind of bear market conditions, it can be a little bit easier, more straightforward to cut through some of the noise. You have a less aggressive sort of shilly FOMO. And from what I said earlier, you know, I'm not a big fan of that type of marketing and comms. So when you're clear and intentional with your communications, with your educational efforts, it can be much easier to reach a wider group of people in these types of market conditions. And same with community meetups and attending some of these Web3 global events. I find that the talks can be very high quality. The connections can be slightly higher quality. That's not to say that during the our bull market that those are not still valuable. It's just, it can be harder to target those right types of individuals that you want to connect with when there's so much more noise in the atmosphere during those like really exciting kind of bull runs.
Totally agreed. And honestly, it's exactly what we're seeing too. I mean, it all boils down to trust, and reporters need trustworthy contacts that they can rely upon, and also trustworthy experts that they can tap to unpack what's going on. And when there's less noise to cut through, to your point, it's just a lot, those relationships are really, really important and valuable. And, we get a lot of mileage up from it. So it is true too, the in-person quality of meetups, it's really like a very dedicated community that sticks around during these times. I think you lose a little bit of that speculative, touristy audience, and more, those who are really serious about building.
Absolutely. And that's a side of it that has always been most exciting to me, and especially starting out at Consensys years ago, focusing in on Ethereum. It was all about what we were building and what the technology could do over the price speculation, at least for me. So it's exciting to have the conversation shift back towards what's being built and why, and kind of recentering it on humans and what they need and what they're engaged with when it comes to the technology.
How do you best stay up to date with, all these creative marketing approaches when, as we've talked about, the industry is changing so quickly and, it's hard to keep up?
Yeah, it does evolve incredibly quickly. You're completely right. I think that the best way to keep up on things is to make sure that you're not only centering yourself on Web3 marketing and events, because there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of activation, there's a lot of comms that are happening outside of Web3. I mean, we all interact with it every day. So paying attention to that, like what's working, what seems to be helping people align their identities with certain messages or products or anything along those lines. I also think that just getting out to those different Web3 community events like we were talking about, you're going to see a lot of creative approaches to communicating messages around various projects and why people should be engaged with them. And I think that those types of events are helpful just as much to see, oh, this is something creative. Maybe I should adapt in some way as, oh, we definitely don't want to do that. And that does not resonate with us and our brand and our community. And it's really, really important to start differentiating between the two. So you always are sort of staying true to what your community wants and needs from you and not just, doing something that does not feel authentic or organic in any way.
Are there any key marketing highlights that you can share from your time at Consensys or CoinFund or even more recently at Shardium? And what made those highlights so successful, do you think?
The theme of all of the highlights that I'll share is definitely that it was focused on the people. It was really specifically all of them targeted towards an audience segment that we had researched and sought to understand and really tried to approach it all from their viewpoint and what would sort of help them align or kind of build brand affinity for us. And one of the ones for Consensys was at DevCon in Osaka years ago. We designed, it was right along the water, the scavenger hunt. This was before the big sort of NFT boom, but we were able to work with Gitcoin and create these little kudos NFTs that corresponded to stickers. We had reimagined a lot of the portfolio companies, they were called spokes at the time of Consensys, as these beautiful, colorful characters that we actually had in this garden space. You have an orange triceratops that was in Fura and, a big kind of colorful MetaMask box. And we really had people going around and actually connecting with a lot of founders of those projects. And each connection, they had to answer a specific question that the founder asked them. And it could have been anything from what's your favorite meme to like, which feature do you wish we had? And you really kind of start building those relationships while at the same time getting a little more information around like, what does your community really want to see that you're doing? And that one was a lot of fun. And, we got a great number of signups there. We were able to continue to build those relationships through our newsletter, moving along down the line from there. And I worked with a great team on that project. So that was a really great one. At CoinFund, we had a birthday campaign when CoinFund, I believe it had been around 7 years, and built a whole campaign around that. And that one worked well because we highlighted each person that worked at CoinFund. We highlighted perspectives and how they had evolved over the years. And I think it was a really good one for both some of our LPs who kind of were interested in the trajectory, as well as potential founders, or founders of potential portfolio companies, because they could kind of see like, what's our perspective on things and how has that evolved over the years? And what are we really looking for? And what's important to us as an investor? So that was a really engaging one and performed very, very well. And then recently at Shardeum, the timing is a little different than we had initially anticipated, but I worked with you and your team as well on our recent announcement of our 5.4 million strategic round. And that was really exciting. And it worked because our team came together so quickly to make sure that we were communicating appropriately around the round. We did as much planning ahead as we possibly could around the marketing and making sure that we could get that out on social. And it was a great example of very, very quick and efficient reaction time and leaning on the relationships that we've spent time building well before this campaign came into light.
Yeah, those are great examples. Thank you for sharing those. I love the Osaka one of the, sort of real life activation. In terms of the audience there, was that, what was the audience like there?
That was definitely a more technical audience. We were able to lean on brand recognition when it came to, they knew Gitcoin, they knew MetaMask, they knew Infura. But part of the goal of that campaign was also sort of almost humanizing in a way Consensys, because I was seen as this big, big kind of entity in the space, kind of centralized, but really they were made up of so many different smaller projects that we were trying to resource and support at that time. So helped to illustrate a little bit more of the organization's place in the ecosystem and really what we were seeking to do for the overall, Web3 and Ethereum communities.
Love that. And then you also mentioned with the recent Shardium announcement example, the power of relationships. how have you built those relationships over the years? And then, how have they become important in different ways?
I mean, relationships are something that, I think same with you and your team, you just cannot emphasize that enough. I think over the years, I've tried very, very hard to maintain connections with people just because you want to be able to help them out as well. And I think that if you kind of approach this from what can I do for these folks just because it's best for them, it's best for the ecosystem, the relationships generally are not hard to maintain and they just sort of come together. But if you approach it from a what's in it for me type perspective and it's very transactional, just like with broader community initiatives, that really should not be at the heart of what you're doing. And people can tell, and it does make a really big difference. I think also with relationships, finding the right partners, like Melrose and others, and making sure that you're connecting with them and reaching out through their networks to lean on those relationships, especially when it comes to a big announcement like we had recently, and really important as well. So kind of finding those right teams with the relationships is a great way to sort of scale your network in that way as well.
Well, thank you. We're so appreciative of the opportunity to get to work together at this capacity and to be able to help. But you made such a good point that we see through and through, and part of our job is educating. You already have an awareness around this, but relationships with reporters as it relates to PR is not, it shouldn't be transactional. It's very much like if you give them your expertise and help them understand what's happening with the news cycle or at any given moment, and you're sort of giving of your time and expertise, the amount that you can get back from that is really tenfold in terms of the opportunities and the relationship. And I think our clients who understand that, and the people who we see, putting in time and energy into building those relationships from a very authentic place, have those for many years to come. And the industry is small but growing, and people are sticking around and changing jobs. But the more that people stay in touch, the reporters are very much, I don't know, I guess this whole industry is built on trust, right? So it's about being a trustworthy resource.
If you don't actually care about the people and what they also need, I don't think you're really in the right industry or the line of work or right line of work, because it's just all going to be at a very superficial level, and you're not going to be able to really move the needle in the way you hope for and kind of progress in your career when it comes to, I think, marketing and communications, especially.
Taking a step back from marketing at the moment, what do you see as the biggest hurdles to onboarding, users into Web3 today?
Yeah, I think with that bigger audience segment, like we touched on earlier, I think that there's a few fairly large hurdles at the moment. Some of them are the news cycles when it's less good news. You don't want something negative to be the only thing that the general public has heard about Web3 recently. And if you're home for Thanksgiving or for the holidays and all the questions that your family are asking is about something that they saw in the news that maybe was less than positive, that's a really big challenge, because those are sources that they already trust. And if that's where they're hearing the only news that they're getting around Web3, it's a massive hurdle. I think also we have a lot of challenges with user experience. Folks will not be inconvenienced even for a second for the most part when I'm talking about the bigger population, not the folks that are already converted and excited about crypto. They're really thinking about how people can interact with Web3 in a more seamless, less intimidating way is extremely important. I think, and also one of the last big hurdles are, unappealing drama and certain personalities on social media platforms. People don't necessarily want to be a part of a community if the main people that they're seeing are just the loud, perhaps at times less than pleasant folks, whether they're yelling at each other or about regulation. It does not make for the appearance of a very welcoming environment.
Yeah, it makes it scary to enter when you are afraid to say the wrong thing.
Exactly. You don't want people coming after you across your social media platforms or accounts that you have. And, it can be, I think, a bit nerve-wracking for people. And also back to the identity piece, they don't necessarily want to appear to be aligned with someone whose views perhaps they don't agree on, but maybe that person is their only source of, again, like this Web3 conversation, and they're not engaging in any other way.
What's the next big focus for Shardeum in 2023, and what are the goals for the rest of this year?
No, we have a very exciting year ahead, or the rest of 2023. Like I mentioned, we just announced our 5.4 million strategic round. So that was really, really exciting for us. And the next really, really big thing will be mainnet, which we are moving towards having happen before the end of the year. So full speed ahead there, and everyone across the team is gearing up for that.
Really, really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience. I certainly, really appreciate it. I know everyone, I'm sure, learned a lot about like audience segments and everything that you shared. Are there any closing thoughts or resources that you want to share for any marketers looking to enter the space or?
And thank you so much for having me, Kelley. And I would say for folks that are just sort of curious and, you maybe have some marketing experience, you want to dip your toes into Web3 a little bit more. I think that LinkedIn can actually be a fairly underrated way to connect, but don't just send a request to people, send a little note. If you see someone who's a marketer or even like myself in Web3 and you're like, I might want to explore that or have a conversation, send them a note. I think that those kinds of one-on-one moments and getting perspective like that is incredibly valuable. And a lot of folks are happy to share their insight and try to help guide you or at least point you in the right direction.
Great tip. Especially during a bear market, I think there's more, willingness to like onboard people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks again, Kelsey. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by Melrose PR, a leading provider of communications and PR strategy for Bitcoin and Web3 innovators. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter @proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.